So we keep mentioning in passing the concept of YouTooCanWoo, the studio of which you are invested. And I mean, there are so many things that I would talk about. I mean, obviously, you know that both of us admire YouTooCanWoo. We think you're a fantastic studio, and you know, to be New York based is so awesome. We're very proud of that. And I don't know if this requires a disclosure, but Zach and I used to work together when I worked at Avalanche, so that's part of how we came to know each other.
Yeah.
You know, with one thing that is curious to me, you know, small, middle-sized business, making it work. You talk about the idea of having, you know, microphones that suggest to somebody that is in the know that you are also in the know. You know, how much, when you're operating your business, does that come up as part of the conversation for planning? You know, the idea of making sure that you're representing as an authority, as a source of knowledge in a very competitive industry.
I think that's like a really interesting part of our business that we actually think about quite a lot. Is when you walk into our space, like, what does it feel like to be in our space? And what does that mean to different types of the people that might come into our space? And when you're talking about a musician that would come into our space, having the feeling of joy of having, like, being surrounded by all these fun things that you can make music with, I think is really important. So like in our edit room, we have like a bunch of synthesizers, and they're like, sorry, they're really, you know, they're really good synthesizers. They're not the synths that you would expect either. So it's like a quirky second take on what synthesizer you would see in a studio.
Okay.
And then the microphones, as we've already talked about. And if you're a recording engineer, and guitars and things like that, if you're a recording engineer and you walk in, we want you to be like, well, like to think of the possibilities of all this gear. Like we have this mixing board, and we have this gear that you can use that honestly a lot of the time is like maybe not the best idea to use it because it adds a lot of like work to get that stuff into the signal chain.
Right.
But like it's there if you want to use it, and it like triggers that moment in your head. It's like, oh man, I could run this through this piece of gear and then back into that piece of gear. It's like, oh, this would be so great. We could work here. We could do this. And right now, as we speak, actually, we are rebuilding the connectivity between all the rooms to further allow musicians and recording engineers to like do something really interesting and cool, and collaborate. That's another big word, is the idea of collaborating. Collaboration in our space is super important. So it's like we can get audio signals from one room into another room, and we can get it into, so there's 3 rooms. One of the rooms can go to one of the rooms pretty easily, and then back pretty easily. Not great, but okay. It can go kind of into one room into the other, into the 3rd room, and then not back really at all. So, and it gets very complicated. It's like, well, we want to be able to send signal from any room to any room and record it, and perform it or record it in any room. And so as we speak now, my coworkers are working on a new plan to do all that stuff.
Oh, nice.
So that's going to be really exciting. And then the third part of this whole thing is, well, what if you're not a musician or a recording engineer? What if you are part of the industry as a decision maker, as a tastemaker, as a director, as a producer, as a video game producer? Like, what does that feel like to walk into our space? And that might not have anything to do with specific pieces of gear. It might have to do with like the general sense of gear. Yeah. But the general sense of musical instruments around. But focusing on making sure that when you walk in, you feel like you're in a creative space that feels focused and feels clean and feels nice to be in. So our aesthetic, as you have seen when you've been by, is sort of like mid-century living room, I guess. And the idea, when you walk into a living room, you should feel comfortable. You should have a comfortable seat. It should have nice light. Like, we're the only studio I know of in New York City that has like that amount of natural light that's also on the first floor.
Yeah.
most studios are either in basements or like dungeon style studios in basements, or they're in the penthouse. The penthouse is nice. It's just you got to go all the way up to the penthouse
Right.
to get there, and they're generally in Manhattan, which has its own set of problems in terms of the cost of running the studio and things like that. So, and for me personally, I come from like a very like purely music background, and I never thought about any of the client services part of being like, I thought a lot about the working with artists part of this whole thing and knowing what it means to have like stuff around that aids the creative process. But the client services aspect of the whole thing was new to me. And you know, I learned a lot from my business partners at YouTooCanWoo about all that stuff. And you know, back to the New York part of that, it's interesting in New York as well, because in LA, a lot of people's studios are like in their house, or they're on like a lot maybe. They have space, there's more space.
Right.
And New York is like, I mean, I don't need to tell you all, like there's just not very much space.
Yeah.
So like the other part of this whole thing is like, how do you become efficient with your use of space and your use of personnel to make sure that, you know, all that collaboration and all those things can happen in a way that like is efficient for everyone involved. It is another huge part of our space.
Yeah.
I think I may not have answered your question, actually.
No, I think you did. No, you did pretty well. And in fact, I think so well to the capacity that you're saying it wasn't something that you've thought about previously coming to YouTooCanWoo, and yet it seems like you had a pretty strong sense of what the beats were, which suggests to me, and this would be my kind of a follow-up question, is this written down? Are there people that are like kind of plotting this out, or is it something that happened organically and you're just kind of rattling it off? We have
many documents about, but that go into like hyper specifics of client services and things like that, and gear purchases and spreadsheets about what gear we're going to get over the next few months and things like that to aid in our refresh of our studio's connectivity, as I was just talking about. As well as we just did we have a lot of documents about a refresh of the interior design that we just did. Yeah. The studio was originally built, this is again like way outside of my range, but I work with people who have a very high functioning aesthetic, is what I always say. So the aesthetic of the space used to be with all this red velvet and white. And it was modeled after the TWA airport, that super ultra mod look. And when the TWA hotel opened, we all went and we're like, wow, it's back, it's all here, this is crazy. I had never actually been to that airport, so I had only seen it in pictures. Yeah. But it was cool, it was really cool. There was red velvet stuff everywhere, and you know, the hotel was just beautiful. And we all got back from that and we're like, all right, well now we probably need to do something different in the studio because it's time to move.
Because it's back.
Yeah. So I don't know exactly what they're going for right now. It kind of feels like Miami 1972. So a lot of like coral and like pastels. Cool. I think it looks pretty awesome. Nice. But there's like some starch colors and things like that, which I think is nice, and it's a little brighter. It's not the dark red velvet. It was cool, but it did kind of get a little dark in there, so everything feels a little brighter now. Right. So that's also been well documented. I think for me, I come from a collaborative background, so with playing in bands and working in theater and working in film, video games are extremely collaborative, as you know. So the idea of working with people, even though I had never thought about it, it did resonate pretty quickly because I have worked with people and I understand the idea of like we have to meet somewhere halfway in terms of our mentality, and if I can make this space a comfortable place for everyone, not just musicians, but all sorts of people that walk in, if I can help aid in that, you know, that's totally a good idea, you know. Yeah. So yeah, it was never written down at like the start of our business, although it is part of our business plan to have like a welcoming environment and be like a collaborative hub. Like, that's all actually in our business plan. Yeah. But it was assumed. I mean, I remember the first time I walked into the studio before we had created our business partnership. The studio was open for a few years before that, And I remember walking in the first time, I was like, man, this is nice. This is
Yeah.
like the nicest music. Like most music studios are not like this kind of niceness, and,
Yeah.
or they're nice in a different way.
Yeah.
This is nice. Like I'm walking into like the best living room, like this really nice place that I would like to spend more time in. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so it was like assumed when we started the partnership that we would continue down that road, and I was definitely called out for I was like leaving a trail of garbage behind me wherever I go, like literally. So I was called out for that a few times. And
Yeah.
spilled some coffee a few times. That was not great. But, I actually started trying to dress nice, not
Yeah.
as nice as you all do, but dressing way nicer. I mean, pretty. I don't know. I still don't think I dress nice, but I think that I made an improvement.
Yeah.
But and then I didn't have a big beard. I had tried to do this a few times before in my life, and it
Yeah.
always, for lack of a better word, like got rabbinical.
Okay.
It was like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't quite have it worked out. And David was looking at I used to play in a band I still play in Deidre's band.
Yeah.
Deidre's band used to play more regularly. I used to play in that band on keyboards, and I guess there's a picture of me playing keyboards, and I had this beard. At the time, I had a big beard, and
Yeah.
my coworkers, David and Deidre, were like, "You look so cool with this beard. You should grow the beard out." I was like, "I don't know. It always goes this way. It's a whole thing." And David got me a beard kit for a Christmas present one year.
Oh.
Oh.
And it totally works. It's like, yeah, you put this beard goop in it and you brush it and comb it and stuff and use the scissors to cut it, and
Yeah.
it actually is like a manageable thing.
Yeah.
So,
Nice.
I think that was a part of my building out an identity at the studio. It's like, well, I'm like, I'm the guy with the beard. It's like, why don't like David's got the crazy sideburns.
Right.
Derek's got this like mullet thing happening
Yeah.
now.
Right.
It's like, all right, I'm the beard guy, so why not go all the way?
That's great. Well, I mean, that speaks to, I think, a really effective, functioning, loving community,
High functioning aesthetic,
Yeah.
and a community of very good friends who care about each other and want each other to succeed.
Yeah.
That's the other
Yeah.
important thing to remember about the studio is we're not unique, but we're a group of people who have worked together in various capacities for a very long time, and some of us are related. There's brother and sister, and some of them are married. We have the sister's married to the husband, and so it's a whole crew of people that have been working together for a very, very long time, and we trust. There's a lot of trust that has accrued. For me, I've known these folks for 20 years, and so over those 20 years, I've gotten to trust them like as much as I trust my best friends and family, and I would hope that this is the same about me. But it would be very difficult to have a business like this if you didn't have that accrued trust, because it's very difficult to run a small business in the arts where everybody's kind of working towards their own goals together if you don't have that worked out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And yeah, all those elements I definitely noticed as soon as I walked into your space for the first time too. I mean, I had obviously been, next to you for a couple years, and
Yeah.
knowing that there was a music studio there, and occasionally I'd see you like come outside, and the beard guy, and occasionally I'd see the guy that looks like he's from the 70s with the sideburns, and I'm like, they look cool, there's some cool people next door. But also just in my head assumed it was the music studio that you're talking about, like dark, maybe concrete, maybe like music, stuff around, and
It's like, yeah, Chinese food containers
right,
and guitars.
right. But then when I finally actually came into your studio, it was like warm and welcoming, and everyone, like, you all look so cool, but there's not this weird pretentious behavior.
you.
Like, everyone's so warm and welcoming, and it's a really good vibe that you guys have created. And even as a non-musician, I feel like I could come in and make music. I don't know what I'd make, but I don't know if you guys would want me to do that ever, but like it does, even as someone that like doesn't know how to use any of the equipment you have in there, it's inspiring, and it gives you those feelings of like, ooh, anything could happen here.
Well, I truly appreciate you saying that, because that's exactly the goal, is to be an inspiring community hub, and hopefully without any pretense about music or Brooklyn or any of those things.
Yeah.
This can be that can be kind of overwhelming in Brooklyn. There's like we came up in Brooklyn. I've never lived in Brooklyn, but the studios in Brooklyn, and my being a musician in New York, like Brooklyn is a part, like Williamsburg is a part of my 20s as a musician, of playing there a lot, and there's so much history there, and I think it's like, we're not trying to relive that experience of like being in your 20s and being in Williamsburg, and even though the studio is right in the center of where all that was happening at that time, it's more of like I think we're thinking of it as like a happy, like a positive place, a happy place where we're using that as part of like a larger idea that's like moving forward out of that, and not being caught up in like any of the pretense of that world.
Yeah.
Or, not to say that world is pretentious, but just saying that like it can become pretentious if you are like living in that, if you're stuck in 2007 or something like that.
Right.
Which I don't feel like we are.
Yeah.
I hope we're not.
No, yeah, I think it's very successful and unique and surprising, and feels very like honest. And I mean, that's why we wanted to do the podcast there with you guys, because it's like, it just feels good, and it feels like there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration and like at like a human level.
That's awesome. Yep. That's exactly what we're hoping for, is that human collaboration.
Yeah.
Human.